In the earliest days of existence, before the land had formed and the seas had stilled, the cosmos was a swirling chaos of light and shadow. Amid this formless void stood the heavenly plains of Takamagahara, home to the celestial gods or kami. Among them were Izanagi and Izanami, the divine siblings and consorts chosen by the elder gods to bring structure to the world below. The high gods bestowed upon them a sacred task, to descend and create the land of Japan. To aid them, they handed down a divine tool, Ame-no-Nuboko, the jeweled spear of the heavens. Standing together on the floating bridge of heaven, Izanagi and Izanami looked down upon the chaotic ocean below. With reverence and purpose, they dipped the tip of the jeweled spear into the churning waters and slowly stirred. As they lifted the spear back up, briny drops fell from its tip, swirling and hardening into the first island, Onigoro-shima. Moved by the miracle, the two descended to the newborn land. There, they erected a heavenly pillar at the center of the island. Around it, they decided to perform a sacred marriage ritual to unite their powers and continue creation. They agreed to walk around the pillar from opposite sides and meet in the middle. As they crossed paths, Izanami, the goddess, spoke first. But their first union bore malformed offspring, deities born without form or function. The elder gods declared the ritual flawed, for the female had spoken before the male. Determined to correct their error, Izanagi and Izanami performed the ritual again. This time, Izanagi spoke first, honoring divine order. Their union was now fruitful. From their marriage came the birth of the islands of Japan, each a sacred child born of gods. Awaji, Shikoku, Okinoshima, Kyushu, and finally Honshu emerged from the divine womb of Izanami, cradled by the ocean. But their creation did not stop there. From their union sprang countless kami, spirits of wind, sea, mountains, trees, and all the natural elements. The world was being shaped with each divine birth, a living realm guided by balance, cycles, and celestial intent. Together, Izanagi and Izanami stood as proud parents of a world slowly forming from the void. Yet, the joy of creation was soon to be shadowed by tragedy, for not all births would be easy, nor all creations without consequence. This was only the beginning of the gods' journey. As the days turned and the heavens watched, the world that Izanagi and Izanami created flourished. The islands they had birthed rose like sacred children from the sea, and the multitude of kami, spirits of wind, forests, mountains, and rivers, spread across the land, shaping it with divine essence. Together, the divine couple stood as architects of reality, their names honored across the still young world. Their union, now sanctified by balance and cosmic law, had brought into being the fundamental forces of nature. With every new birth, the cosmos became more vibrant, more alive. Their divine bond, once unsure and clumsy, had grown deep and radiant. They were not just creators now, they were parents of a living realm. But in creation, there is always a cost, and not all births come with joy. In time, Izanami conceived once more. From her womb came deities of stone, rain, wind, and fertile plains, gods who would sustain the physical world. Yet one more powerful, more volatile god remained to be born. As the final labor began, Izanami struggled, her breath shallow, her divine form racked with pain. She was bringing forth Kabutsuchi, the god of fire. As the child entered the world, flames consumed Izanami from within. Her cries echoed across the land and into the heavens. The divine fire scorched her body, searing the goddess from the inside out. Her once glowing face turned pale. Her limbs trembled, her divine radiance dimmed. By the time Kabutsuchi had emerged, burning and shrieking with life, Izanami was dying. Izanagi knelt beside her, helpless, horrified. The goddess who had shaped the very soil of the world now lay broken, her essence slipping into darkness. He held her close, but the fire had already taken what it came for. With a final whisper, Izanami descended into Yomi, the shadowed land of death. Leaving behind her beloved and the realm they had built together, grief overtook Izanagi. The beauty of creation turned bitter in his mouth. In a fit of sorrow and rage, he unsheathed his sword and slayed Kabutsuchi, the very child whose birth had stolen his beloved. As Kabutsuchi's blood spilled, it gave rise to even more deities, gods born of wrath and ruin, storm and steel, unintended consequences of pain. Yet no divine vengeance could return Izanami. Her absence created a void in the order of the cosmos, and in Izanagi's heart. The world was no longer just new and pure. It now bore the mark of loss of mortality. The cycle had shifted, from life into death, and Izanagi would not rest until he confronted it. Thus began his fateful descent into the underworld, a journey of love, loss, and final separation. Izanami was gone. The land that once echoed with the laughter of creation now sat silent beneath a sky veiled in mourning. Izanagi, once the vibrant father of gods, was hollowed by grief. The fire god Kabutsuchi had stolen her from him, and though he had slain the child in his fury, it brought no peace, only silence. But Izanagi could not accept that death was the end, not for a goddess, not for the one with whom he had built the world. Driven by sorrow and defiance, he made a fateful decision to descend into Yomi no Kuni, the land of the dead, and retrieve Izanami from the clutches of oblivion. It was a realm from which no one returned, a twilight world of rot and stillness where the dead whispered eternally in the dark. With divine resolve, he crossed the boundary between life and death. The path into Yomi was steep and cold, winding deeper into a decaying silence. The air grew heavy with despair, and the vibrant colors of the living world gave way to shadowed gray. Foul winds stirred the dust of forgotten spirits. The smell of decay clung to every stone. At last in the gloom, he found her. There stood Izanami, her figure obscured by the dark, her face hidden in shadow. Izanagi cried out in joy and desperation, begging her to return with him, to ascend back into the world they made together. Her voice came softly, echoing with sorrow. "You are too late," she whispered. "I have eaten of the food of Yomi. I now belong to this place." Still, her love for him stirred. She agreed to petition the dark gods for release, but only if Izanagi promised not to look upon her while she did so. She disappeared into the black halls beyond, and Izanagi waited in the gloom, heart pounding, breath held. But time dragged on, doubt crept in, fear gnawed at him. Unable to bear the suspense, he broke his promise. Drawing a combed tooth from his hair as a makeshift torch, he struck it aflame and cast light into the darkness, and what he saw shattered him. Izanami's once radiant form was now bloated and rotten, her body crawling with maggots and 8 thunder gods that clung to her flesh. Her beauty, her divinity, gone. Death had transformed her into something otherworldly and terrible. She awoke, enraged by his betrayal. "You shamed me," she shrieked, her voice echoing like a curse. In fury, she summoned the horrors of Yomi, decaying spirits, grotesque demons, and the Yomatsu Shikam, the foul women of the underworld, to chase him back to the realm of the living. Izanagi ran. Through narrow corridors and crumbling tunnels, he fled the land of death. To delay his pursuers, he hurled objects behind him. His black headdress turned to grapes, his comb to bamboo shoots, each tempting his hunters to stop and eat. Still, they came. As he neared the entrance to the world of the living, Izanami herself gave chase, her wrath now godlike, her love transformed into vengeance. Just as she neared, Izanagi reached the entrance to Yomi and found a massive boulder. With all his might, he rolled it into place, sealing the passage between life and death. On the other side, Izanami's voice came, mournful and bitter. "If you leave me, Izanagi, I will slay 1,000 of your people each day." And with a heavy heart, Izanagi replied, "Then I will give life to 1,500 each day." The cycle of life and death was now set, an eternal rhythm of endings and beginnings. Izanagi stood once more in the light of the living world, forever changed. The underworld had touched him, and his grief had become something deeper. A knowledge of mortality, of limits, of divine sorrow. He had journeyed into the realm no god was meant to see, and survived. Izanagi stood before the great stone that sealed the entrance to Yomi. His chest heaved with exhaustion, his heart pounded with a storm of emotions, grief, betrayal, horror, and shame. Behind that stone lay everything he had lost, his beloved Izanami, the purity of their union, and the innocence of the world they once shaped together, but more than sorrow clung to him. The stench of Yomi was in his hair, the darkness of the underworld was in his skin, and the presence of death weighed on his spirit like rot in his bones. He had seen her, his wife, his partner, the goddess of creation, turned into a putrid vessel of decay. He had broken a sacred promise. He had fled like a mortal from the horrors of the underworld, and now he returned not as the creator of lands, not as the proud father of gods, but as a man stained by death. Something within him had changed. The world no longer gleamed as it once had. The rivers ran cold, and the wind carried a chill that was not there before. Every leaf, every stone, every drop of dew seemed to recoil from him. He was unclean. He was no longer fit to walk among the living without first casting away the residue of Yomi. Burdened with defilement, Izanagi wandered until he came upon a clear, sacred river. Its waters glistened beneath the light of the heavens, untouched by shadow. There, beside the flow of purity, he removed his garments, each one soaked in the memory of the underworld, and cast them aside. As each article fell to the ground, new spirits and deities were born from the discarded filth, spirits of impurity that would become yokai and lesser kami, tied forever to misfortune and corruption. But Izanagi was not finished. He stepped into the cold river and began to cleanse himself, beginning a rite that would echo through time as the origin of Misogi, the sacred purification ritual. He washed his left eye, and from it was born Amaterasu, the radiant sun goddess. He washed his right eye, and Tsukuyomi, the calm and silver moon god, came forth. Finally, he cleansed his nose, and from it erupted Susanoo, the fierce storm god. These divine births did not come from joy or celebration. They came from necessity, from the act of healing, from a god trying to make himself whole again. As the waters carried away the last remnants of Yomi, Izanagi looked upon the new children of the heavens, bright, powerful, and destined to shape the world anew. Through pain, he had birthed balance. From decay, he had summoned light and shadow, order and chaos. The gods of day, night, and tempest were not just his children. They were the embodiment of what he had become, wiser, scarred, and forever changed by the journey through darkness. And so began the next chapter, not of creation, but of restoration, not of building the world, but understanding its fragility. After sealing the entrance to Yomi and leaving behind the realm of death, Izanagi no Mikoto wandered through the twilight of the mortal world, his soul weighted with grief and corruption. Though he had escaped the underworld with his life, he had not done so unscathed. The stench of decay lingered in his breath, shadows clung to his garments. Every step seemed to echo with whispers of the dead. He had seen death, he had touched it, and now it touched him. The lands around him shied away. Birds quieted in his passing, trees stood still, the wind avoided his skin. Even the sky above seemed to frown, dimmed by the impurity that clung to the once proud god. Determined to rid himself of Yomi's taint, Izanagi sought out a sacred place. A river at the edge of the world, where the clear, cold waters flowed directly from the high plane of the heavens. It was a place untouched by corruption, guarded by silence and sunlight, hidden from the gaze of man and spirit alike. Kneeling at the riverbank, he undressed slowly, as if peeling away layers of sorrow. Each discarded item, his robe, his staff, his accessories, fell to the ground with a strange resonance, and from each new spirits emerged. Impure kami, born from the residue of the underworld, embodiments of his anguish and burden. Some were malevolent and would go on to become spirits of misfortune and disease, but Izanagi ignored them. He waded into the river. The waters rushed over him, shockingly cold, clear as polished crystal. He immersed himself fully, letting the currents sweep away the filth of Yomi, and with each ritual movement, each rinsing of hand, eye, and limb, divinity stirred. He first washed his left eye. From the droplets of water that fell into the river there rose a radiant being, Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun. Her hair shone with threads of golden light, her gaze illuminated the heavens. She was born of light, destined to rule the celestial plane, and her very presence banished the remnants of shadow. Next he washed his right eye. From this, the gentle and composed Tsukuyomi, the god of the moon, emerged. Cloaked in silver and silence, he was serene where his sister was fierce. a calm reflection to her burning radiance. He would command the night, guarding the peace and rhythms of dusk and time. Finally, he washed his nose. With this act, the waters trembled, and from their turbulence arose Susanoo, the storm god, a wild and impassioned force. His eyes glinted like lightning, his breath stirred whirlwinds. He howled with grief and rage from the moment of his birth, embodying both fury and vitality. These were not mere spirits. They were the three precious children, the most powerful deities yet born. They were Izanagi's legacy, forged not in joy but through trial and recovery, each reflecting a piece of his soul. Light, reflection, and chaos. Rising from the river, Izanagi stood renewed, his spirit cleansed, his mission complete. He looked upon his children and assigned each a realm. Amaterasu, to rule Takamavahara, the high plane of heaven. Tsukuyomi, to govern the night and its mysteries. Susanoo, to command the seas and storms below. But even in this moment of rebirth, a tension lingered. The storm in Susanoo's heart had not yet found peace. His path, unlike his siblings, would soon lead to rebellion, sorrow, and exile. Yet for now the heavens rejoiced. From death, life had returned. From pollution, purity had bloomed. From a god's pain, the celestial order had been born. And thus, in the flowing waters of the river, the great cycle continued: creation, loss, purification, and new creation. As the final ripples of Izanagi's purification faded into stillness, the world seemed to pause. The wind that had once recoiled from him now carried the sweet scent of dew and the warmth of the morning sun. The leaves, once motionless, danced again. The shadows no longer clung to his feet. Izanagi stepped out of the sacred river not as the same god who had entered it. He had walked through creation. He had walked through death. And now he stood as something beyond both. The three divine children, Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo, stood before him, each radiating a distinct and powerful essence. As he looked upon them, a quiet understanding bloomed in his ancient heart. Amaterasu, resplendent and commanding, glowed with a light so pure it could pierce even the underworld's veil. Her every breath hummed with divine order, and wherever she turned her gaze, life responded. Flowers leaned toward her, clouds parted, and the very sky seemed to rise in reverence. Izanagi felt a swelling of pride, but also a sense of distance. This was no child who needed his hand. This was the dawn given form, the very sun that would guide the world forward. Tsukuyomi stood beside her, calm and silent, his silver robes rippling like moonlight on a still sea. His presence cooled the air, yet brought no chill. He radiated thought, balance, mystery, a quiet guardian for the night, destined to illuminate the darkness not with fire, but with reflection. He was the rhythm to Amaterasu's radiance, the ebb to her flow, the contemplative stillness to her blazing command. And then there was Susanoo. He paced like a storm confined in a vessel too small. His eyes flashed with untamed energy, and his voice, when he spoke, rumbled like thunder. Yet even in his wildness, Izanagi saw raw potential, the power to shape oceans, shake mountains, and challenge the very heavens, but also the danger of unbridled emotion. Susanoo was not yet whole. Izanagi stood before them, his children, his legacy. Born not in the golden age of creation, but in the twilight of struggle and purification, and in that moment he knew. His time as the active shaper of the world was ending. He had stirred the oceans and formed the lands. He had known love, loss, and the deepest sorrow. He had crossed into death and returned through pain. But these three, these brilliant, serene, and tempestuous beings, were not just his offspring. They were the next gods, the future, the dawn after the dusk. He raised his voice, now calm and clear, and spoke words that would echo for eternity. To you, my children, I entrust the realms of existence. Amaterasu, take the high plane of heaven and let your light guide all beings. Tsukuyomi, rule over the night and mark the sacred rhythms of time. Susanoo, master the seas and the fury of storms, and learn to temper power with purpose. He did not know how each would fulfill their destiny, nor what trials would follow. But his heart, once heavy with grief, now beat with a quiet peace. He had created, he had suffered, he had purified. Now he would watch. With a final gaze at the river where gods had been born anew, Izanagi turned away from the affairs of the world. He withdrew to the realm of quiet divinity, leaving behind his children to rule, to clash, to grow. And thus began the age not of Izanagi, but of the celestial trinity. The sky was cloudless the morning Izanagi summoned his children to the summit of Takamanohara, the high plane of heaven. It was here, in the sacred silence between the celestial dome and the breath of the earth, that he had watched the world form from chaos. Now it would be the place of parting. The three divine children stood before him, Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo, each bearing the unspoken weight of expectation and legacy. Izanagi, now older not in form but in spirit, raised his gaze to the heavens and then to his children. In his hand he held three sacred objects, tokens of realms forged from his own body during his purification. First he turned to Amaterasu, whose presence radiated the brilliance of midday. Her eyes met his with steadiness, and though young, she stood with the dignity of the sun itself. From his left eye, long ago washed clean in the river of purification, Izanagi produced a mirror of dazzling brightness, said to reflect not only the outer world but the inner soul. To you, Amaterasu, he declared, I give the realm of Takamanohara, the high heaven. Rule with light, justice, and warmth. Let your radiance sustain the land, dispel shadows, and guide both gods and mortals. Amaterasu bowed with solemn grace, accepting her duty not as a gift, but as an oath. The wind shimmered around her, and the heavens themselves seemed to sing. Next, Izanagi faced Tsukuyomi, the calm and silent god whose glow was gentler, cooler, a comfort to those who dwelled in the darkness. From his right eye, he withdrew a silver orb, pale and smooth like the moon's surface, etched with the cycles of time and tides. To you, Tsukuyomi, I grant the domain of the night, the quiet hour of rest and reflection. Mark the passing of time, balance the tides, and bring serenity to the dreaming world. Tsukuyomi inclined his head in wordless understanding. He neither smiled nor frowned, but his stillness held wisdom. Where Amaterasu blazed, Tsukuyomi soothed. The two were celestial complements, destined to revolve yet never touch. Finally, Izanagi turned to Susanoo, the storm in flesh, whose eyes sparkled with fire and rebellion. The earth seemed to tense beneath his feet. From his nose, the final cleansing point of his ritual, Izanagi drew forth a jewel-like blade, sharp as wind and fluid as sea foam. Its edge shimmered like waves under sunlight. And to you, Susanoo, he said, voice both steady and stern, I bestow the rule of the oceans, the realm of storms and salt, of depths and tides. With your strength, protect the boundary between worlds. With your rage, challenge what must be shaken. But Susanoo did not bow. His fists clenched, his gaze wild. Why must I be cast down into the seas while they soar in the sky? He protested. Am I not born of your body as they are? Do I not carry your blood? The sky trembled at his outburst. Clouds darkened. A distant thunder cracked. Izanagi's expression did not change. The seas are not beneath heaven, my son. They are vast and untamed. They are the cradle and the grave. You, who roar like thunder, belong there, not as a prisoner, but as a king. Yet the storm within Susanoo was not stilled. He took the blade with trembling hands, eyes burning with questions, fears, and fury. His destiny felt like exile, and he would not accept it quietly. The three siblings now stood as rulers of heaven, night, and sea, sun, moon, and storm, each set on paths that would echo across generations. Izanagi, his duty complete, stepped back into the mists of divine retirement. He had shaped the world. He had crossed the land of the dead. He had brought forth the next age. Now he would watch from afar, unseen but ever present, as his children shaped the future, for better or for worse. And so began the reign of the celestial gods, but harmony would not last. As the echoes of his final decree faded across the heavens, a profound stillness settled over Takamanohara. The divine siblings, Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo, had each received their sacred roles, and the threads of fate had been passed to their youthful yet potent hands. Izanagi stood among them like the last ember of an ancient fire, burned long, burned bright, now gently dimming. He looked upon the faces of his children, each one bearing a fragment of himself, each destined to shape a world he had only begun to mold. The sunlight that radiated from Amaterasu, the cool silence in Tsukuyomi's eyes, the tempestuous flame within Suzunu's heart, they were not only gods, they were legacies. A deep breath passed his lips as if releasing the final burden of creation. The sky above shifted, and a soft golden haze enveloped the plain. He knew with the certainty that only the divine possess, that his time as an actor in the world's stage had come to an end. The children of his purification now carried the divine torches forward. His role had changed, not diminished, but transformed. The world no longer requires my hand, he murmured to himself. It is time I become the watcher, not the wielder. The weight of grief and love for Izanami still lingered, like a shadow at the edge of light. The memory of Yomi, of the stench of death and betrayal, had never left him. And though he had washed his body clean, his soul bore the scars of that journey. Creation and loss were forever intertwined in him. He turned away from his children, not because he lacked love, but because he understood love was sometimes in letting go. With slow, measured steps, Izanagi descended from Takamanohara. Each footfall left no trace. The winds neither resisted nor embraced him, they simply accepted. The rivers he had once purified himself in whispered thanks. The trees bowed as he passed, honoring the Father of all things. He crossed no boundary. He faded into the unseen world, not into Yomi, but into the realm of memory, of spirit, of myth. He did not die, for gods do not perish as mortals do. Instead, he transformed into a presence felt in silence, a breeze through pine needles, a glint of dawn over sacred mountains, the warmth of the hearth that births the day. His name became a prayer, his tale a foundation. Where once he had acted, now he inspired. Where once he had created land from sea, now he nurtured the soul of the land itself. And though the world moved forward, through light and darkness, harmony and war, Izanagi remained, a sacred ancestor, resting in the spaces between worlds, forever watching, forever remembering. Thus ended the age of the Creator, and the age of the celestial children began. Time passed. The celestial children had taken their realms. Amaterasu ruled Takamanohara, her radiant light guiding gods and mortals alike. Tsukuyomi kept silent vigil over the night sky, serene and unwavering. Suzunu roared across the oceans, his storms wild and willful, but deeply bound to fate. And Izanagi? He no longer walked among gods nor trod upon the lands he helped form. His divine spear, once stirred in the chaotic seas to bring forth islands, now lay untouched, enshrined not in any shrine of stone, but in the quiet reverence of memory. He had withdrawn not out of sorrow, nor out of weakness. Rather, it was a retreat born of completion. The spirit beyond sight no longer did mortals see Izanagi as a figure with voice and form. Instead, he became the stillness between waves, the hush before dawn, the invisible pulse behind sacred rituals. Priests spoke his name in quiet chants. Sacred fires were lit to echo his breath. Rivers were venerated not only for their life-giving waters, but for the memory of his purification, the act that birthed the sun, moon, and sea gods. Shrines were not always built for him, but he was present in all of them. For in every invocation of purity, in every call for balance, the spirit of Izanagi lingered. He became the unseen axis of Shinto, the origin of divine lineage, the symbol of cleansing and rebirth, the first to journey through death and return, making way for rites of transition, the wisdom without words unlike the younger gods who still quarreled, warred, and ruled. Izanagi became a figure of quiet guidance. His lessons were not spoken aloud, but understood in the structure of the world itself. His story taught that creation is born through unity, but also that loss is inseparable from life. His sorrow over Izanami's death became the very foundation of ancestral veneration, of honoring those who passed beyond, but whose spirits never truly left. He stood as the divine father, not in command, but in legacy. In every Shinto wedding ritual, where the sacred bond between male and female deities is honored, Izanagi and Izanami are invoked. In every ceremony of purification, Misogi, it is Izanagi's bath after fleeing Yomi that is remembered and imitated, washing away defilement and beginning anew. And in every prayer for harmony between heaven, earth, and sea, the division he once enacted is recalled with reverence. The Eternal Watcher legends say that Izanagi did not die. He faded into the high realm of spirits, beyond even Takamanohara. There he watches, not with eyes, but with presence. He is the elder flame behind the younger stars, the ancestor of gods, yet never absent from mortal breath. When the world trembles, when rituals falter, it is said that his balance must be restored. When purity is lost, it is to Izanagi that the faithful return, through rivers, smoke, and silence. Though his spear rests, his will endures. Though his voice is silent, his name is sacred. He is not worshipped for power, he is remembered for beginning. He is not present in form. He is present in everything.